Good morning and welcome to Buddha's in Your Landfill, or Buddhism just plain and simple. Yesterday I talked about, the story I talked about was Wrong Turn Eddie. And it got some good likes and a couple of good comments. And I got more out of it, I think, than anybody because it was kind of like what I share here is basically what I discover in my own life. I'm semi-retired photographer, so I don't have a very exciting life. I do whatever comes in the door, and so it's a very quite mundane life. So all I've got is my everyday experience. So when I went to Atlantic City this weekend, that was a big adventure, and I got a great insight into my own life. And so what I was trying to share with you was that Buddhism, plain and simple, is insight into the patterns or story of your life that holds you hostage. In other words, our story is unconscious, and it kind of like shapes the way we feel in the world. It shapes the way things happen to us. It shapes our experience in the same way that a character in a novel is shaped by the story of the novel, or a character in a movie is shaped by the plot, you see. So you kind of like have to look at yourself, as I look at myself, is that we're all writing a living story. And that story is, the older we get, the more story we have. When we're first starting out, we're given a pen and we begin to write our story, and it's got a theme to it, it's got a plot, but it's unconscious. Maybe you call it our fate or something, but we're shaped by the conditions of our birth, our family, our religion, our country, our locality. All of these things are conditions. Our particular parents, their story, the story that they're trapped in shapes the story of the child, you see. And all of these conditions are unconscious. So we start out kind of like as our little character. We're given a name. We've got a book, and a lot of people, you write a journal. If you're creative, you write stories. Everything is a story. If you are a novelist, you write a story. If you're a reporter, you report on the stories. If you're a painter, you paint the story. If you're a dancer, you dance the story. Story. It's the story, stupid, to refrain the classic Clinton statement. It's the story. The story is the message, not the content. The content is secondary information. The primary information, the primary meaning or story or meaning or truth is the story in which the content is shaped. So it's imperative in our search for peace and the cessation of suffering, which is Buddhism plain and simple. When Buddha was asked what he taught for 45 years, he said, I teach suffering and the cessation of suffering. That's it. I teach suffering and the end of suffering. Everything else, that was his story. Everything else was just variations of that. So in my own life, that's basically what I constantly do. I constantly discover suffering. And when I discover it, when I see it as a story, as I see it as the totality of it, the suffering ends. So I wrote up here, let's take a look at my little diagram, my little stick man. So here's the question, what's your story? And he's asking this guy what his story is, and he doesn't know, but out the back of his head is a projector that's projecting his story on the screen of reality. And the most common story, maybe the fundamental story of us all, is I'm always a victim. So that kind of like is the root story. And the feeling of a victim is lose-lose. When you're in a situation where no matter your best efforts did not remove suffering. Your best efforts, you tried so hard. You tried to be good. Your intentions were good. You tried to succeed. You tried to restore justice, everything. And it might work for a little bit, but then finally it all falls apart and you lose. So this idea of lose-lose. Is the guy in the quicksand. You're caught in the quicksand of lose-lose. Which is the feeling of being a victim by some cause, some other, some force. It was fate, it was the blacks, it was the Jews, it was the communists, it was Trump, it was the liberals. They're the cause of my suffering, the reason I can't be win-win. You see, somebody out there, or if I can't find anybody out there, it's me. I'm the blame. I'm always screwing up. I'm stupid. I'm a failure. Something's wrong with me. I'm a flaw. I shouldn't have been born. The world would be better off without me. So that's the flip side, the two coins of lose-lose. Either somebody else is making me lose, or I'm making me lose. But the result is lose-lose. And the feeling of helplessness, impotency, powerlessness. I need a savior. I need somebody to get me out of the quicksand. So that's kind of like our basic formula, but then we have to discover that and give it our own name, like I did yesterday in Wrong Turn Eddie. Now, Wrong Turn Eddie means I always make the wrong turn. And interesting, too, is that, and I think that's what happened on my trip. And by the way, go back and look at yesterday's talk. They're on my Facebook page. They're on my YouTube, Ed Conley YouTube. Or on my blog, tokillaminotaur.com. So I'm trying to keep a thread going in these talks so that they are sequential, yet they all stand alone. And so yesterday I just named my story, Wrong Turn Eddie. I always make the wrong turn. And it's interesting that when you are about to see the story, it intensifies. Just like the caterpillar gets very dysfunctional before it goes into the cocoon and becomes a butterfly. It's a good metaphor. So before you see, if your intention is to see your story and to see the truth of your suffering, why you suffer, not the fake causes, they did it, or I did it, or somebody did it, you see, I'm a victim, you see. That's what we're conditioned to see. And that's what we're manipulated to see by external saviors. See, the savior will say, well, the immigrants are the cause of your problem, and if you like me, I'll get rid of them. Oh, that's all we need to do. I won't suffer anymore. I won't lose. We'll just get rid of the cause, the immigrants, or whatever. But the point is that unless you see the true cause of your suffering, which is your story, which is seeing the story of it, is kind of like the movie Groundhog Day. So the Groundhog Day was a story of a person who was trapped in a cycle, a repetitive cycle of suffering. And every day he woke up, it was the same day. And everyone else thought it was a new day. He knew it was the same day. So he had a heartfelt intention to get out, to break the logjam, to free himself from this karma, the wheel of samsara, the Ferris wheel of suffering. You see, I want to get off. How do I get off? So he kept trying different ways and he couldn't get off. And finally he stumbled into the truth. He stumbled into the way to get out. And he woke up and he was off the Ferris wheel. So that's lose-lose. Groundhog Day is lose-lose. I'm trying different ways of looking at it. So the Buddha's teaching, Buddhism plain and simple, is that when you see the truth of suffering, the seeing is the end of your suffering. The seeing is the cessation of suffering because you're not caught in it. When you see the story of your suffering, that you are a character on a movie you're projecting on reality, when you see that you are a character in an unconscious novel that you're writing, the victim, poor me, you see, when you see the story contains the whole thing, you see. When you see your story, you're in the story but not in it. Like Jesus said, you're in the world but not of it. You're in the story but you're not of it at the same time. So when you see your story, that's going to be a discovery. That's going to be a satori in Zen. That's going to be kensho. That's going to be eureka. That's going to be, oh, I see. But you have to see yourself as you're in it. You have to see this, that you're the seeing instead of the character in the story. But you're still the character in the story. You still have a personality. You still have a history. People still know who you are. People still call you by name. Hey, Ed. You see, people still know you. You know you. You know where you are. But at the same time, you're not unconsciously playing in the story anymore. You're conscious of the story as you play it, and then it becomes a joke. Then it becomes a comedy routine. Then it becomes a hee-haw. Because you're laughing, because you're liberated from the story. And you may still play it out, but it's always going to be funny. I know I do. I still play out Wrong Turn Eddie. But now it becomes a source of laughter. Here's Wrong Turn Eddie again. Because I know I'm not it. I know I'm not Wrong Turn Eddie because I can see Wrong Turn Eddie. I'm the seer of Wrong Turn Eddie. If I can't see the totality of Wrong Turn Eddie, my whole life, if I can't see my whole life, my 81 years in one little event on the interstate coming back from Atlantic City, if I can't see my whole story, all my suffering, all the drama, all my efforts and failures, all my wrong turns in one simple event, you see. When I can see the whole catastrophe in one simple thing, I see it as a story. And that story contains the works. But to see that, you see, you become the seer of reality instead of being a victim of reality. But you still play the game, but now you're not held hostage by it, and you're no longer suffering in it. You joyously participate in the game like Christ joyously participates on the cross of suffering. The cross of suffering, you see. So Christ goes to the cross joyously because he knows, he sees it. So he participates in it, but joyously with laughter because he's free from it. So I hope that you get free from your story by seeing it through and through. And then when you do, you know you do when you laugh in the midst of your suffering. Thank you for dropping in.